Hello, Vincent Carroll speaking. This tutorial is called Rebellious Stomach Qi. Rebellious Stomach Qi means the bringing up of the contents of the stomach. It might be the burping up or it might be vomiting up, but one way or the other, the contents of the stomach are moving in the wrong direction. They're coming up rather than progressing downwards towards elimination. It's worth pointing out that about 30% of the population have a hiatus hernia to a greater or lesser extent. And a hiatus hernia is where there's a dilatation between the end of the esophagus and the stomach, and sometimes a portion of the stomach can go above the diaphragm, totally destroying the cardia valve, and that's a serious hiatus hernia. Most people have a less serious hiatus hernia, but everybody has the potential for a hiatus hernia simply because the valve is deliberately so designed as a weak valve. It's a band of muscle that's part of the diaphragm, nothing else. Other valves are slammed door valves, such as heart valves. So when they're closed, they're closed, and when they're open, and there's no such thing, or there should be no such thing as a leaky valve. But the cardia valve linking the esophagus to the stomach is always leaky because it can be overridden. Any of us can burp up if we have to, and sometimes that's necessary if we accidentally take food perhaps that we shouldn't take or that disagrees with us. It's natural to vomit up, and that's the way they're designed, and that's a good thing. But rebellious stomach Qi is when that food is pushed up for whatever reason. And from an acupuncture point of view, usually it's a liver Qi stagnation in the lower jiao, in the middle jiao rather. Well, of course, it can be in the lower jiao spreading up to the middle jiao, and I find that's usually what happens. People perhaps with rebellious stomach Qi due to liver in excess often have Qi stagnant in the lower jiao, meaning a bloated abdomen, and that creeps into the middle jiao, creating the burping up of food. And sometimes, of course, it goes up into the upper jiao, meaning a sense of oppression on the chest. So the Qi, when it's stagnant, particularly in the middle jiao, may provoke the bringing up, the rising up of Qi with food, and therefore one gets burping up and sometimes vomiting. And of course, if heat enters into the stomach as well, for example, if somebody takes food that is contaminated with a bacteria or whatever, naturally one has a tendency to vomit upwards, and very often a tendency to diarrhea going downwards as well. And there's probably nobody looking at this video that hasn't experienced that at some stage in their life. It's a way of protecting yourself by eliminating this spoiled food. Spoiled as in, it reminds me of the way Giovanni used to describe it, the late Giovanni. I remember him mentioning about spoiled food. But from a Western medical point of view, we're probably talking about bacterial content, but it can also mean food that is excessively hot from a spicy point of view. And that can disagree with people, particularly people whose baseline is one of heat, and there might be a tendency to bring up as well. And sometimes people get what's called a reflux esophagitis. That's where the acidic content of the stomach regurgitates into the lower 1/3 of the esophagus, and that burns off the cells, the sensitive cells in the lower 1/3 of the esophagus, and therefore it tingles sensory nerve endings, creating a sense of pain, and that's called esophagitis. And it's again very, very common, and if a person burps up acid often enough, that happens, and it can cause a lot of pain, otherwise known as heartburn. But that's another sign of rebellious stomach Qi. So in rebellious stomach Qi, you're bringing up. So what's the solution from an acupuncture medical point of view? I find it very helpful to put a brake on the stomach 25 bilateral, too soon from the center of the navel, angled in, and that sort of can stop the gut moving to any great extent. And it can be very useful in diarrhea, of course, as well, but it's also useful in bringing up. I think if you take heat out as well, I like using Ren 13. Ren 13 is more or less situated anatomically where the esophagus enters into the stomach, and if there's a lot of heat there, it'll blush up nice and red. I'd also use Ren 12 as well, simply because Ren 12 is over where the root of Heaven Qi is created, is over the stomach area, and that's probably hot as well. And therefore that'll blush up nice and red as well. I'd also take out heat with large intestine 11. But generally it can be a good thing to burp up, because in effect you're getting rid of what should not have been taken into your tummy in the first place. But if it's a more permanent sort of situation where people are regularly burping up their food, and very often perhaps in bed at night you have to sit propped up because you do have a hiatus hernia, and with the valve destroyed, food in the stomach, if you're lying horizontal, can slosh up into the lower 1/3 of the esophagus or even higher. So in situations like that, I find tonifying the spleen can be very helpful as well. Spleen 6, stomach 36, Ren 12. But it's important as well to take heat out, because the stomach's pH operates between 2 and 3, whereas the esophagus should operate at a pH of about 7. In other words, it is sensitive to acid, whereas the stomach is used to acid. So you mustn't let stomach content invade into the lower 1/3 of the esophagus. And when it does, of course, there's heartburn pain. But that will happen if there is rebellious stomach Qi. Get to the root of it. We've been speaking about manifestation. The root of it probably is liver. I mean, if it's dietary, by all means, in your case history taking, you will have found out about that. But for the most part, for most people, there's a liver in the lower jiao invading into the upper, or invading into the middle jiao, and that's causing the stomach to reverse the line of Qi and burping up. So in situations like that, you might want to use liver 3, gallbladder 34, but also drag down with stomach number 44, which is a spring point of the stomach channel. I find that combination very, very useful. Plus, of course, as I said, local points, Ren 13, Ren 12 as well, and taking heat out at large intestine 11. If the heat is deep and toxic and has been there for a long time, spleen 10 is the point you must use. But otherwise, it's superficial, it's local, and you take heat out at a local level. Thank you.